as we said, we have about 350 people here. Full disclosure, each campaign got about 30 seats. There were about 40 people from the Nevada Democratic Party, but mostly we went out and found people who were interested in the campaign and want to know more about each candidate.
And we'll be starting with Senator Bernie Sanders tonight. He won a coin toss, which means he will be coming out here first. So please join us in welcoming Senator Bernie Sanders.
Senator, what a pleasure to see you.
How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
All right. Have a seat. Good to be in a little hot seat here for a minute. And it's time for the second part of our town hall. Please join us in welcoming former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to the stage.
Great to see you. How you doing?
I am great.
Good. We're happy you're here with us. And Senator, let me start by telling you a little bit about Secretary Clinton, who's been describing you recently as a single-issue candidate. You disagree with that characterization, but this week you told my colleague John Ralston that your one litmus test for a Supreme Court nominee is overturning Citizens United. So why doesn't that prove what Secretary Clinton says about you? I mean, you didn't say that you have a Roe versus Wade litmus test. You didn't say you had an immigration action litmus test, a marriage equality litmus test.
I don't think that's what Secretary Clinton is actually talking about.
But that is the priority. It is the litmus test. Not one of them, it's the litmus test.
No, I think...
It's good to see you, Secretary.
It's great to see you, too.
Thanks.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. So,
thank you.
We're going to do what we did with Senator Sanders. We begin with just a few questions from us, and then you get to get rid of us and get to the real people, I promise. As you know, President Obama now says he regrets voting to filibuster Justice Alito's nomination. To quote the White House this week, quote, throwing sand in the gears of the confirmation process was a regret. You joined 24 other Democrats when you were in the Senate to filibuster Alito's nomination. You ultimately voted against actually both Alito and Justice Roberts. Do you also regret that? Considering the situation we're in now, do you wish that you, like now I think President Obama, feels as if, boy, wish I didn't have that vote. Wish I hadn't participated in something like that.
Well, the way I look at it is this, making your argument.
But a filibuster, if you had been successful, then Judge Alito would not have gotten a vote on the floor of the Senate.
Master on the rules. You get to use the rules.
Let's talk a little bit about a judge this week in California that ordered Apple to help the FBI unlock an iPhone belonging to one of the two terrorists that killed 14 people and injured 22 others in San Bernardino, California. In response, Apple CEO Tim Cook wrote an open letter to call attention to what he calls the chilling implications of complying with the court's order. And he wrote, among other things, ultimately, we fear this demand would undermine the very freedoms and liberty our government is meant to protect. I know you've talked a lot about Big Brother. Whose side are you on, Apple or the FBI?
I'm on both.
Senator, a couple more that we want to get out of the way before we get to the audience. Last week you said it was a low blow for Secretary Clinton to bring up the past criticisms that you had for President Obama. You said you had every right to disagree with him, but it went further than that. In fact, this is you calling for a primary challenge, and it was on a radio show. I'm going to play it and then get you to react to it on the other side.
One of the reasons the president has been able to move so far to the right is that there is no primary opposition to him. And I think it would do this country a good deal of service if people started thinking about candidates out there to begin contrasting what is a progressive agenda as opposed to what Obama is doing.
All right, that was you in 2011, but why should Democrats, I understand that.
But that was in response to a question on a radio show.
No, I get that, but there are some Democrats who want to continue the president's policies. Right. Why should they trust you as somebody who wanted him primaried? You said it would have been a good idea if he would have been primaried.
Well, you know, by the way, is
so
terrible.
You actually still think he should have been primaried?
Look, this is...
All right, let me move to another question. Some of your lines of attack against Senator Sanders in this campaign sound familiar, and as we did with Senator Sanders, we have a little clip we want to play. Take a listen.
You are not going to wave a magic wand and have the special interest disappear.
I wish that we could elect a Democratic president who could wave a magic wand and say, we shall do this and we shall do that. That ain't the real world we're living in. And
All right, first clip was from a month ago. Second clip was from 8 years ago.
Right.
Many Democratic voters obviously didn't believe your criticism 8 years ago was fair. Why should they believe that the criticism you're making of Senator Sanders isn't just as unfair as they thought it was 8 years ago? So this magic wand, they should not discount your criticism this time, even if they did 8 years ago. Now, very quickly on another Democratic president, this happened earlier today on your plane during a quick press gaggle. You were pretty tough on Bill Clinton's record, and you said you hit his record on Wall Street. You said this was a guy who wanted to deregulate Wall Street, was for welfare reform, the Welfare Reform Act that you didn't like, and got NAFTA through. It didn't sound like a presidency that you were very pleased with.
Democracy.
Given that we have Harry reading the audience, I think he knows how hard it is.
Harry!
How hard it is to herd people in your own party. I will grant you that. All right, Senator, it is time to get the questions from the audience instead of us. So let's get started there.
Secretary Clinton, a federal judge this week, ordered Apple to disable the privacy feature in the iPhone used by one of the San Bernardino terrorists so law enforcement can access the data. Apple CEO Tim Cook is pledging to fight it, calling it a dangerous precedent and saying the government is asking Apple to hack our own users. Who do you think is right here?
And terrorism.
The problem is that if you open up that back door that doesn't exist right now, as you said, the United States is looking for information from a cell phone that was used by a terrorist. But does China have the same intentions?
That's why
and does Russia and does Cuba and does North Korea? You know, as we said, we have about 350 people here. Full disclosure, each campaign got about 30 seats. There were about 40 people from the Nevada Democratic Party, but mostly we went out and found people who are interested in the campaign and want to know more about each candidate. And we're starting tonight with the topic of immigration. Dulce Valencia is an undocumented 20-year-old who can legally stay in this country because of the president's executive action that holds kids available to stay in this country, even though they were brought here illegally, to stay as long as they're working or in school. It's known as DACA. They call themselves Dreamers. Dulce says she supports Clinton. And Dulce, where is your question? Muy buenas noches, Dulce. ¿Cómo estás?
Buenas noches, ¿estoy bien y usted?
Un placer verte.
Un placer.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias a usted. Senator Bernie Sanders, you stated in the past that the reason why you voted against immigration reform in 2007 was because it wasn't perfect. As president, would you veto our shot at immigration reform if it wasn't deemed perfect by you?
Secretary, on his plane flight here, Senator Sanders attacked your husband's legacy, and I'm going to quote. He said, Bill Clinton was the president who led the effort to deregulate Wall Street, was the president who fought for the disastrous NAFTA trade agreement, was the president who pushed this so-called welfare reform, which was absolutely disastrous for low-income people. Should you be held accountable for your husbands? And now I'd like to say hello to Aurora Aguilar. Aurora, like so many millions of others in the United States, is part of a mixed status family that lives with the fear of deportation of a loved one. Aurora, muy buenas noches.
Muy buenas noches. Yes, my question to you, sir, if you become the President of the United States, what would you do about the bars? My husband, I'm an American citizen, my girl's an American citizen, my husband was here 18 years. I tried to bring him out of the shadows, how you said, and I petitioned him, and they gave him a 10-year bar. He's been in Mexico doing his 10 years, 6 years now we've been separated. My little girl was in kindergarten when he left, the one in the pink right there. And the other one was in middle school, and now she's going to graduate high school this year, and her dad is not here to see that. What would you do to bring my husband home? How long, when you change, when you get there, how long would it take to change those policies? Because I've been waiting 6 years, 6 years out of my life.
Well, I think we should hear from the people. And by the way, you both have been booed at some time. So we actually have we can tell this is a competitive race at this point. All right, we're going to open the questions.
We like it. Good
back
contest.
up to the audience.
We also like the facts. The facts are our friends, so let's talk about them.
Fair enough. Well, Madam Secretary, we're going to go and start with the same issue that we started with Senator Sanders, and it's the issue of immigration. As you know, Nevada is almost 28% Hispanic, and Latinos are the fastest growing group in the state. People here are concerned with legal immigration, the ability to work in this country, and reforming the current system, to name just a few things. So, I'm going to turn it over to Alan Aleman here. He's going to ask a question about how a Clinton administration would deal with immigration reform.
Hi,
Mr.
Mrs.
Aleman.
Clinton. In 2007, you opposed giving driver's license to undocumented people. Why?
All right, Senator, we're going to stick with the topic of immigration. I've got Wayne Smith here. He has another question on immigration. He happens to be a veteran. Mr. Smith, come on up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Senator Sanders. Hello, I'm here both as the vice chairman of the Nevada Democratic Veterans and Military Families and as an undecided voter. We have become aware that in the last 20 years there have been hundreds of veterans who have served honorably as legal U.S. residents in the military. After discharge, they ran afoul of the law for possession of illegal drugs or another nonviolent crime. As a result, their legal status was revoked and they were deported. In many cases, these veterans ended up in countries they left when small children, often unable to even speak the language. Remember, we're talking about veterans here who served our country and people that are comrades of mine in arms. Is this policy fair, and what would you do about it if you're elected president?
And I understand that somebody asked Senator Sanders a question because her husband was in Mexico. I don't know who asked that question. And I want to tell you.
Madam Secretary, let me follow up on something. I've asked you a few times about the prioritization of immigration reform.
Right.
And when I've asked you about your first 100 days priorities, you've mentioned a lot of issues, and you haven't put immigration reform first. And some immigration reform advocates are concerned that if you don't put it first, that the same thing that happened in 07, the same thing in 10, how do you prevent that if you don't make it first? As you know, these legislative lifts are hard. And the concern is if it's not first, it may not happen. Senator, what is your line when it comes to who gets deported and who's not? President Obama has,
sorry, I didn't hear that.
President Obama has deported more
Yes.
folks than any president.
Yes.
What is your criteria for deportation at this point for folks that are here in this country?
If people
they're
are
undocumented. What is criminals? Because some people think just being here undocumented.
Not for nonviolent.
And I think my friend, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, is here somewhere. And there she is. Thank you.
Secretary Clinton, just very quickly, how would you go about cutting out those 3 and 10-year proposals? How would you do that? And how long would it take you to do?
How quickly are you going to get immigration reform done?
It is
President?
a top priority.
What does that mean? First,
Well, no,
first 100
Chuck,
days?
I'm not a dictator here.
End it as soon as possible.
Secretary Clinton, one quick follow-up to Chuck's. Usted se compromete, do you promise to deal with immigration reform within the first 100 days?
Absolutely.
Within 100 days.
All right, Senator, we're going to change the subject here. My next question comes from Taylor Scott Cruz. Taylor, why don't you get up here? He tells us he is supporting Clinton, but he has a question regarding your
Hey,
economic
anybody here supporting
platform.
me?
Oh, yeah.
All right, good. All right.
It is even. Senator, don't worry.
Just wanted to make sure, Chuck.
Don't worry. We're just doing full disclosure here, sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Oftentimes, you treat racial concerns as if they were economic ones, saying that creating jobs and reducing income inequality is the solution to racially charged issues. How is creating jobs for low-income earners going to stop a system of police brutality towards black Americans, a system of mass incarceration for black men, or even a poor education system for the predominantly black inner cities across America?
Senator, I want to follow up something you said at last week's debate. You said race relations would be better under a President Sanders than they've been under President Obama. What did you mean by that? Why do you believe that?
Secretary, say hello to Rocio Puente. She speaks both English and Spanish. A little bit more comfortable in Spanish, she tells me, so I'm going to translate for her. She wants to ask you about DACA, the president's executive action that gives children brought here illegally through no fault of their own, their parents' temporary legal status. Rocio, muy buenas noches.
Buenas noches. ¿Cómo usted haría posible que los estudiantes que reciben DACA se puedan convertir en residentes permanentes? Ellos viven con mucho temor cuando tienen que renovar su tarjeta cada 2 años.
Tiene toda la razón. Mrs. Clinton, what would you do to make possible that the DACA students become permanent residents? You know, they live with a lot of fear because they have to renew their permits every 2 years, and that is a terrifying prospect for them.
Right.
Gracias, Rocio. Secretary, if I could, in the summer of 2014, you said undocumented children from Central America should be sent back as soon as it can be determined who responsible adults in their family are, a position you've been defended by saying we had to send a message to families and communities in Central America not to send their children here. That's far from the message Pope Francis had yesterday. He criticized leaders on both sides of the border, calling migrants cannon fodder and their treatment a human tragedy. Do you still believe that you held that position, and is that a right position? But should those children be a message.
All right, Senator, thank you. We have a question now, go ahead, from Sandra Gomez-Jimenez on the issue of feminism.
Good evening, Senator Bernie Sanders. My question is, do you consider yourself a feminist? If so, how do you, as a white male, understand the intersectional identities that people of color face, especially when entering higher positions of power within business or government?
Chuck?
All right, thank you. Our next question comes from Joe Sacco. He's a realtor here. He is a Sanders supporter. Mr. Sacco, go ahead with your question.
Secretary Clinton, as a realtor here in Nevada, I know personally how important the economy and the housing market is to the stability of our great nation. As the Democratic presidential candidate who has delivered speeches to the largest U.S. financial institution in exchange for hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees, why are you hesitant to release transcripts or audio-video recordings of those meetings in order to be transparent with the American people regarding the promises and assurances that you have made to the big banks?
Well,
I do respect you very much. In fact, only a decade ago, I was a very, very big supporter of yourself and your husband. It actually broke my heart when you said marriage was between a man and a woman. How can we trust that this isn't just more political rhetoric? Please just release those transcripts so that we know exactly where you stand.
Senator, up next is Cameron Miller. He is a filmmaker who has a question about minimum wage. Cameron, good to see you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'm all about everyone making as much money as they possibly can. However, if we increase the minimum wage, how do we ensure that that cost isn't passed on to the consumer? How do we ensure that once we increase that to $15 an hour, that we're not creating a situation where those same people are now below the poverty line because prices are going to, I would assume prices are going to increase.
Look, the truth is.
I just saw another one of my friends, Congresswoman Titus. Thank you for being here.
Senator, one question comes from high schooler Jessica Acuña, who will be voting for the first time this year. Jessica, buenas noches.
Buenas noches. So my question to you is, I'm a student, so I like how you want free education. But what is your plan to possibly achieve this, being that it would cost about $70 billion, my bad, per year, more than twice what the federal government spends on Pell Grants.
Excellent.
Wait, I'm not finished.
Oh. She's going to vote for the first time and make sure that question counts.
So, would free college make higher education more efficient, more innovative, and higher quality?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the point of the last.
So, would free college make higher education more efficient, more innovative, and higher quality?
Let me answer it in this way.
Secretary Clinton, we're going to talk about housing. You brought it up. It's been brought up. It's a big problem here in Nevada. This was the top state in the country for foreclosures during the crisis. Francisco Morales here has a question for you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you for your lifelong commitment to the Democratic Party and comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
But as you know, for many Hispanics, achieving homeownership is synonymous to achieving the American dream. Yet many of our families were hit particularly hard during the Great Recession and housing bust. What would a Clinton administration do to ease the fears of homeownership among our community? I actually purchased a home 6 months ago, and I can relate because the amount of hoops that I had to jump as a 24-year-old Hispanic were just unprecedented. So thank you for that.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you. We are going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about affordable health care and a whole lot more. Una breve pausa y al regresar, salud accesible para todos y más en segundos. Thank you very much. Secretary Clinton, Gustavo Ramos is retired and he has a question about Social Security. Gustavo, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Muchas gracias. Gusto verte.
Good evening, Secretary. How are you? My question has to do with Social Security. Hardworking people pay into Social Security with hope and anticipation that in the future they will receive the benefit of their labor and monetary investment. Social Security needs a 21st century update to keep it financially sound for future generations. This will take presidential leadership. What is your specific plan to address this issue for the many who need it for economic survival?
Secretary, among those different issues that you mentioned, as you know, people pay Social Security taxes on income about to $120,000. Senator Sanders wants to change that. You were opposed to raising the cap in 2008. This time around, you seem to be considering it.
Yes.
But you haven't come out one way or the other. So should people start paying Social Security taxes on income over $120,000?
That's one of the options, Jose. That's why I said.
But it's 120, 150, 200.
Yeah.
Do you have
well,
any?
it could.
Chuck.
All right. Would you ever imagine raising the retirement age in the next 10 years? Welcome back here to Las Vegas, our Clinton Sanders Town Hall. Senator Sanders is up. We've got some veterans issues for you, Senator Sanders. This is a state, of course, where the unemployment rate for veterans is more than a third higher than the rate for veterans nationwide. I want to bring up Vanessa Remus here. She has served in Iraq, is a member of the Army Reserves, and she has a question for you.
Good evening, Senator. Now, veterans are always thanked for their service, and all of the candidates say that they support veterans. But unfortunately, that support has not translated into jobs. And I would like to know how you will ensure that support translates into getting veterans hired, and not only hired, but getting them jobs that are commensurate with their skills and abilities.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We're going to take a sneak a break in here, and when we come back, a lot more issues. You'll hear from a lot more folks. Thank you. We're going to stick with veterans issues here. It's less than 10% of the population. Here's veterans, but about half of them are enrolled in the VA healthcare system. This is Pani Sua, who retired from the military in 2015 and has a question for you. And we just learned today that he's a volunteer for the Clinton campaign, but I think the question is still relevant.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, your chairmanship of Veterans Affairs Committee in charge of oversight for the VA is arguably the most important position and highest ranking you've held in government. During that time, you were a major defender of VA care, despite 7+ IG reports of mismanagement and my fellow veterans even dying on waiting lists. At the time, you went so far as to call it manufactured scandal by the Koch brothers to promote the privatization of government health care. We need someone who would fix the issue, not ascribe the blame. If elected as president, how will you fix the VA to ensure me and my fellow combat veterans that will receive the care that we need?
Welcome back to the MSNBC and Telemundo Clinton Sanders Town Hall, just 2 days before Nevada Democrats go and caucus. Our next question. Secretary Clinton, it's been no secret that many Democratic voters who are considering voting for you or for Senator Sanders are worried about some questions of trust. Our next question has to do with that, and it comes from Tiana Winters, who, by the way, supports you. Go ahead.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Tiana Winters. I attend UNLV. I'm a senior. And
Running Rebels.
Very exciting.
Let's go Running Rebs.
I'm representing the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs. My question tonight is, my generation is the generation that grew out of that economic downturn.
Yes.
Gone are the days of affordable tuition, booming job market, and attaining that classic American dream.
Right.
We need a rebel. We need somebody who's going to be by our side and ensure that after working hard and putting in our time, that we will be able to attain that success. My question to you is, because my generation is a little wary of placing another politician in the White House, with your tenure in politics, how are you going to deserve our vote?
You probably saw the exit polls. What about this trust deficit?
I couldn't hear you, Chuck.
I'm sorry. This issue, to be a successful president, you're going to have to erase this trust deficit that you're dealing with right now. You saw it out of New Hampshire. How do you deal with it?
Senator Sanders, I want to turn to Faisal Suba, a doctor from this area who is here with his wife, and he is kind enough, because he speaks 5 languages fluently, which makes us bilinguals feel really bad all of a sudden. He's kind enough to agree to do this in English, mostly. How are you, Doctor?
That's good. That's very good.
Senator Sanders, I'm a physician in town, and my wife, Aaliyah, does a lot of volunteer work in town. We try tirelessly to serve humanity every day.
Thank you.
We are also proud, peace-loving American Muslims. We're the parents of 2 children, and we're very concerned about the safety of our children with the Islamophobia that's rampant right now, as you know. I mean,
Yes, I do.
as president, how would you address Islamophobia?
We have a run on running rebels when it comes to our questions. So our next question comes from Adriana Guizar Vasquez. Adriana.
Hi, good evening. My question is exactly on your debt-free college proposal. Will your debt-free college proposal give the same opportunities to Latinos and DACA students as Senator Sanders' tuition-free proposal? So, based on the proposal that you have right now, with this, for example, the AmeriCorps grants that you're willing to give to students, how would those also be granted to DACA students, for example?
Yes.
The caucus cough, we know that well.
Yeah.
What? Oh, yes, the cough. Secretary, a quick follow-up on that, and I know it's a state's issue, but driver's license for the undocumented. Do you foresee a time when the federal government would be able to include the undocumented in federal grants for education, for example? Because if the state doesn't do it, it doesn't mean that they don't have those dreams and aspirations that they can't reach because in Washington they decide that they're not equal.
Senator, I want to bring Aiden Tarr here. She's got a question about the two-party system.
About the what?
She's a high school student. Is this going to be your first time voting?
Yes, it will be.
Well, there you go. Another first-time voter. Go ahead.
So, seeing it as it is nearly impossible for a third-party candidate to be elective, and the fact you had to switch from an independent to Democratic to be considered as a legitimate candidate, since reformation of our party system has never been addressed by a presidential candidate, how would you suggest to reform our system and allow for other parties and ideas to be represented?
By the way, Senator, I just want to show you. She really worked on this. She wrote it on a piece of paper. This is clearly, just so you know, I was very impressed.
And let me just
with how
add
well she
to it,
did
if I might.
Y como dice Luz, dinero que contribuyen y nunca ven. As Luz says, money they contribute and never see anything back from.
That's right.
Secretary, say hello to Andrés Felipe Rivero. He has a question about labor unions, right?
Right.
Yes.
¿Cómo estás?
Muy bien, gracias. Good evening, Secretary Clinton. Your ties to corporate America have been at the center of this campaign. As President of the United States and former board member of the board of directors of Walmart, will you be silent on Walmart's anti-union campaign? But more importantly, will you propose legislation that protects the right of workers to organize in their workplace?
Tom Perez, our great Secretary of Labor, who is here. Where's Tom? Right there is somebody who has been on the front line standing up for workers and unions. He endorsed me. He's been campaigning for me. So,
will you support a living wage of $15 an hour, which is an issue that is that is at the forefront for working families?
If I could, and kind of to piggyback off that question. And by the way, I agree with you, Chuck. A millennial using pen and paper is unusual.
It was a pen and paper. It's everything. Old school.
But
well done.
Senator, you have often talked of the need for a political revolution in the United States. You're a democratic socialist. When some Latinos hear those words, they think Venezuela and Cuba, Chavez and the Castro brothers, 57 years of dictatorship. Talk to the people who escaped those regimes today and hear you use those words and wonder exactly what you have in mind.
Sure. When I talk about democratic socialism, you know what I'm talking about? Social Security. One of the most popular and important programs in this country, developed by FDR.
Madam Secretary, a little subject change here. Let me introduce you to Mary Chapman. Mary has a question on foreign policy.
What strategies do you plan to employ in dealing with the conflicts between women and children's rights versus the practices being utilized by some of our Middle Eastern allies?
Human rights.
Senator, thank you. I want to introduce you to Luz Perez, who speaks English and speaks Spanish, but she's more comfortable in Spanish, so she'll ask the question in that language and I'll translate it into English for you. Buenas noches, Luz.
Buenas noches. Usted ha expresado su apoyo para el cuidado de los niños asequible, pero ha hablado poco sobre cómo el cuidado de la calidad depende de una fuerza de trabajo fuerte. ¿Qué planea hacer para reforzar el personal de cuidado de niños con los salarios que necesitan para mantenerse en el campo y proporcionar asistencia asequible para los padres y las familias?
Muchas gracias, Luz. You have expressed support for affordable child care, but have talked little about how quality care is dependent on a strong workforce. What do you plan to do to strengthen the child care workforce with the wages they need to stay in the field and then provide affordable care for parents and families everywhere?
Wonderful.
Let me, quick follow on foreign policy. President Obama has announced that he's going to go to Cuba in March. What has Cuba done to earn a presidential visit? It's one thing to open diplomatic ties, but since December, since the official opening, there have been some regression, particularly in some human rights issues. Is a presidential visit a step too far? Would a President Clinton be going this quickly, rewarding Cuba with a presidential visit this quickly? Quick, before I get to the next question, Senator, I wanted to follow up on something you were talking about, the single payer, referred to single payer health care, talking about some of the European systems. You know, a common complaint in those European systems has to do with wait times for treatment, wait times for seeing specialists. How do you propose in your Medicare for All system to not have Americans have to deal with rationing of care?
Chuck,
I mean, this is a common, that's why I say it's a common critique in Canada and the UK in particular. The VA, which is a system that is designed to essentially be universal health care for veterans, had wait times, had a rationing situation. And I know you tried to correct that, but we just had an experiment which we got. How do you guarantee that your plan isn't going to experience the same problem? Some people worry that you've lost leverage.
What?
That some people worry that the administration's lost leverage on this issue of human rights with the Castro regime.
I think it's a...
I'm going to introduce you to William Anderson. Mr. Anderson, you get up, talk about an issue that's pretty important to a lot of people out west, land issues. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, first of all, very honored to go ahead and be here to go ahead and present this question to you. But under Obama, there has been areas here that's been designated as national monuments. And at this point, my people, Nueve, the Southern Paiutes here, we're trying to go ahead and work towards to get Gold Butte designated as a national monument too.
I'm sorry, to get?
Gold Butte.
Okay.
And there's a lot of recent issues that came up here. And what I want to really ask is that there are those who oppose the American people's ownership of public lands and would see those lands sold to private interests. As president, how would you ensure that our public lands remain in public hands and preserve our heritage and lives by stopping corporations from destroying Mother Earth?
Absolutely.
Secretaria Clinton, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Oh my gosh, it's over?
It's already done with this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll try to go, we would try to go a third hour.
Sigamos al fin de este programa. Senator, say hello to Alex Turner.
Hello, sir.
I got this, Alex.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Aspects of the U.S. visa program are currently in the spotlight as a possible homeland security risk. And even before that, it was a concern that it was being used to traffic young women from foreign countries. What measures do you intend to take to ensure that this program isn't used to attack the U.S. or to exploit vulnerable immigrants?
How do you do that, Senator?
Sir, there are several Tier 2 countries that are on the visa waiver program that individuals can get an expedited waiver and visa to come in, and those Tier 2 countries don't meet the minimum standards that defend people from human trafficking.
Right. All right. Thank you, Jose. And we're going to have to take a break here. Senator Sanders, thank you very much. Coming up, we're going to hear, give him a round of applause. We're going to hear from Senator Hillary Clinton. So let's sneak in a quick break. We'll be right back.
As we said, we have about 350 people here. Full disclosure, each campaign got about 30 seats. There were about 40 people from the Nevada Democratic Party, but mostly we went out and found people who were interested in the campaign and want to know more about each candidate.